Among those who've spent time with the Crackdown series, there's this sense that the games to date have been dreary to actually experience, yet thematically fascinating to consider. After all, the original Crackdown was largely notable for being a not-awful open-world game attached to the Halo 3 multiplayer beta, and having an alarmingly ending twist with added grim context to the player's actions. Crackdown 2, meanwhile, was seen as a disappointing deviation from the original strengths that also relegated the darker truth of its plot to collectible audio logs. And so we find ourselves in the position of reckoning with Crackdown 3, 9 years after the previous installment. Other open-world games have come and gone in the interim, with some building upon or reworking mechanics first seen in Crackdown. If the game market wasn't already oversaturated with open-world titles, it's quickly approaching that point. In such a context, without even getting into its own share of production delays and changes, what can Crackdown 3 offer that makes it stand out as an interesting work? Welcome to Mojo Plays, and this is our review of Crackdown 3. Before we begin, we publish new content all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. The game opens in chaotic confusion, as your character, one of the several swappable agents of the, agency, awakens in the poverty-stricken outskirts of the city of New Providence. It turns out an operation to infiltrate and liberate the city from the clutches of corporate tyranny went horribly awry, with all but the player's chosen agent vaporized under mysterious circumstances. With their only support being a lone hacker named Echo and the agency's director, the player is thus tasked with picking up where the mission left off.
I need you to maintain focus and production.
Don't worry about brushing up on series history. Crackdown 3 is thoroughly detached from the events of past games. Barring the occasional vague reference shoved to the margins, the game mostly works as a soft reboot and sets the stage for possible future entries. And that's for the best, since certain details, such as the agency now seeming altruistic in nature, don't quite line up with previously established plot threads. Instead, it's all about the agency clashing with their latest threat, the megacorporation known as Terra Nova.
Terra Nova was born from a dream, a vision of brighter tomorrows.
Plot-wise, the game relies heavily on moment-to-moment play to create player investment. Traversing the neon-lit streets of New Providence and destroying Terra Nova's property makes up most of the experience, with occasional animated cutscenes to further clarify the impact of the player's carnage.
Climb to the top and shut this mother down.
It's fine for letting open-world exploration and combat experimentation take center stage, but the downside is that this approach leaves Crackdown 3 feeling deprived of any deeper theme or purpose. This especially grows tiresome around the last string of bosses, wherein the implication of a more elaborate conspiracy beyond Terra Nova is reduced to mere sequel setup. Fortunately for players, the surrounding game proves engaging enough to accept slapdash story elements. Unfortunately, said engagement never truly rises past the level of competent but unexceptional.
Don't worry, you'll have your weapons, and the world will suffer.
Crackdown 3 plays very much like the quintessential sandbox game of the 2010s, right down to the eclectic range of firearms and the fixation on repetitive busywork. Liberating towers, locating and collecting various items as part of a checklist, striking locations of interest to gain control of the map, name an open-world activity, and it's likely present. The game is unabashed in embracing the open-world template, as it is rote in executing on the specifics of said template. What's worse is, it's less of the game actively failing to meet its goals, and more of a case of it being rooted in now dated design cues. Without necessarily intending to, it evokes works like Saints Row 4 in the layout of its map and the variation in urban zones, to say nothing of a shared neon cartoon aesthetic between the two. Yet Crackdown 3 lacks the boundless personality and messing with virtual world justification that elevated Saints Row 4 to greatness. Instead, this newer game revels in being passable fare. Only in comparing Crackdown 3 to the first do the former's strengths truly shine through, primarily because the game comes off as a somewhat more slick version of the original. Picking up ability orbs to improve the 5-player skills is still innately rewarding as a means of mechanical improvement and as an extension of the compulsive collect-em-all mentality.
Those glowing green orbs? There's some kind of agency training hologram. Grab them to boost your agility skill.
Hopping across rooftops and clambering up ledges remains important to play, proving satisfactory thanks to the emphasis on vertical ascent in the city's design and the solid animation work for the player model. Even the gunplay is a tad more engaging, benefiting from a shift to a 3-gun loadout system and the aforementioned variety of weapons to discover. But there rests the bigger issue. No matter what the game does or tries to do, another game has done the same thing before and better. It repeats and slightly refurbishes where others in the genre and the wider medium of games strive to innovate and vastly improve, with the difference in results readily apparent. That's not to say Crackdown 3 can't deliver the odd cheap burst of entertainment, just that such moments are fleeting and fail to stick in the mind. Anyone looking to the game for audiovisual flair may also want to take heed, as what's on offer is familiar and merely adequate. While its depiction of bright explosions during combat is spectacular and its multicolored skyscrapers are distinctive, much of the game world ends up falling flat due to an otherwise muted palette. The sound design similarly leaves little of a lasting impression, though credit to veteran actor Michael McConaughey for absolutely owning his role as the overly enthusiastic director.
Now that's a crater. 8th wonder of the goddamn world.
Alas, such cannot be said of Terry Crews, whose contribution to the game has been widely exaggerated to the point of being borderline dishonest. While his character Commander Jackson is one of the playable agents available from the start, Jackson doesn't have much more than a handful of canned lines during play. Instead, Crews' most significant contribution to the game is voicing the holographic version of Jackson heard from captured propaganda towers.
Welcome.
Because what we really wanted was a charismatic actor being relegated to a bit part in an already underwhelming game. The bottom line is, while not a bad game, Crackdown 3 is astoundingly superfluous and tedious in its conception. Perhaps it does find an audience, and perhaps it does lead to a whole new rebooted series of Crackdown games. But if this is the starting point for a new beginning, it's hard not to feel like this whole endeavor just wasn't worth the effort.
Thank you for shutting off that stream of bullshit. It was starting to give me a headache.
Check out these other great clips from Mojo Plays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.